Welcome to Ethan and Nick's Trash Boat Podcast. I'm Ethan Finkelstein at I am Finkelstein on Twitter. This is Nick Graves, Nick's Tape 15 on Twitter. And we're back for another episode with the new video format. And we got a hodgepodge of things to talk about today, but I think based off of what we just spoke about off camera, I think we want to talk about college QBs right now, and also the transfer protocol, because we've got a couple names right now that we're discussing. First is Joe Burrow, and the next is Justin Fields. And Nick, I got to say, we'll rehash the discussion about Joe Burrow. I see your points about it, but the fact is I still kind of am stern on my convictions about it. With the fact that I really do believe that OSU wasn't going to maximize him for what his talents were.
And I'm okay with you saying that. I just thought so off the camera. I think Ethan was being a little hypercritical.
No, I absolutely was.
But the point being made on my end was Joe Burrow left a good system for a great situation, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I thought that he could have executed Ryan Day's system. I think Ryan Day would have been able to bend a little bit to, work around Joe Burrow's more pocket presence than Justin Fields. And I'm not saying Justin Fields wasn't a pocket passer. He's made some phenomenal passes, to his first read out of the pocket. If you know, you know. But I thought going to a situation like LSU where for the better part of over a decade, they have struggled at the QB position. I mean, you can put a lot of the onus on the development, right? Joe Burrow came in already exceeding the expectation of what a QB would look like in the LSU system. And when you think about the history of the wide receivers that have come out of that school, like a DJ Chark, Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, Justin Jefferson, and even looking at, some of the running backs that they've had, like a Leonard Fournette and a Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you would think that the steady piece would be the QB. And they've gotten their share of 5-star and even some very proven starters like forget the guy's name. He was at Notre Dame. He had started over 20 games in his career and gets to LSU and looks the same almost looks a little worse than what he did when he left Notre Dame. But you put that on your staff to help develop. Sometimes the kid may have just already maxed out his talent. You can't do anything about that, right? But I felt in not a comparable situation, but, leaving a good system for a great situation. Joe Burrow had already graduated, and to his greatness, he transferred in July late June, and wins the QB starting battle. He's probably still unpacking boxes.
By the way, name of the player you're referring to is Everett Golson.
There we go. It didn't add up, right? Like, he leaves a good system for a great situation. That makes sense. But the time at which he transferred, which was late June, camp's already going. The season starts in like 6-7 weeks, and he wins your starting QB battle. Probably just unpacked his last bowl. That says a lot about how the QBs have gone, the trend at LSU has gone, and it's been bad. And to Ethan's point as well, now he has a chance to have a full off season, spring game, goes through, regular protocol. Now he's settled. We saw the dynamic season that he had.
May I interject, by the way?
Yeah.
Because I love the power of the internet, and this is on both of us. Everett Golson considered LSU, just as a correction, chose FSU, actually. And that's the thing. I don't remember Everett Golson. I had to look him up. That's the problem here, is I don't remember. That was in the relative early stages of the transfer protocol, as far as I know. Yeah. Just because
Notre Dame had their fair share of really good QBs too.
That didn't pan out in the pros.
Um,
Brady Quinn probably being the most notable in terms of pro prospects, but
man, I remember. Yeah.
I never liked Jimmy Clausen, by the way. I never was high on him.
Oh,
And when he floundered in the NFL, I told everyone around me, yeah, that's what I kind of expected.
he had the same situation at Notre Dame that he had at Mater Dei. Like, he had really good exterior talent. Like, he had some. I can't call them run-of-the-mill 4-star recruits because it's California, but like, he had some 4-star wide receiver recruits that were also really good. And he had a couple other athletes that were really good at football that happened to play other sports. Like, there is a situation, that we can talk about where sometimes the talent around you makes you look good. Jimmy Clausen, for a fact. And then you get to college, and who do you get to throw to? Golden Tate, Michael Floyd. I mean,
I also wonder how much of it.
Same thing with Matt Barkley.
Well,
Barkley had decent talent around him.
Well, I also wonder how much of it was Charlie Weiss's system also making them look good, too.
Well, that's the other proponent too, right? Some of these coaches that have these excellent systems, especially with QB success, kind of push the QB to their success, but it's the rest of the talent around them that benefit, right? They're the ones that become the mainstays in the NFL.
Well, the reason I say that is because he was able to maximize the talent with the Patriots. The fact is that Tom Brady wasn't exactly considered a stud quarterback when Charlie Weiss was running the Patriots offense, was he? The receiving talent you had Troy Brown, you had
Troy Brown.
You had Givens. You had Givens as one of the receivers as well. Basically, in terms of their offensive weapons, you didn't have much. I think your running back during that time frame, you went from I actually couldn't even tell you who the running back was prior to Corey Dillon.
Something tells me it's like Kevin Falk.
It may have been, it was Kevin Falk. It was Kevin Falk before it was Corey Dillon. And Corey Dillon actually came over at the end of the Weiss run. I think Corey Dillon was only there for his first year, I think was Charlie Weiss's last year, actually. Because I think, what was the year that Charlie Weiss left? He either left after the 05 season or the 04 season, because he took the head coaching job at Notre Dame ahead of, I think he took the Notre Dame job ahead of the 06 season. So I think 05 might have been his last year. So he did have Corey Dillon for 2 years. But the point being is that, realistically speaking, he made the most of that offensive system considering the pieces that were around him. Because no one was trying to.
That's kind of shifted back to.
Yes, we'll shift back to the transfer stuff.
Because the topic at hand was the state of the NCAA and the transfer portal.
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody who works on the coaching staff, I want to give clarity about what you guys are seeing about the transfer portal and what ends up happening, right? So real quick, we're going to talk about the X's and O's. We're going to throw out the playbook. We're just going to talk about people. I don't think there's the understanding is clear about the transfer portal and why kids want to transfer. I know we have stated a couple times on this call, on our podcast, I'm sorry, about your mental health, right? You always have to be aware of where you want to be mentally and assess and reassess where you are and what could be affecting that. There's a record number of people in the transfer portal this year. I think for major sports like basketball and football, the number is over, if not touching 1,100, it's getting close to 1,100. Some of these student athletes are actually in situations that are not favorable for them. And I want to pull up two specifically, one being Syracuse women's basketball and one being LSU women's basketball. One in Syracuse, they have 10 women transferring from their program. That's a basketball team. There's only 15 athletes on a basketball team. 10 are transferring. Oh, the kids aren't tough enough? If you have 10 student athletes, I don't care what sport it is, transferring from one program. This is transfer. They're not graduate transfers. They are freshmen, sophomore, juniors who still have eligibility or not close in their progress toward degree to graduate just yet. You have 10. That's a problem with the environment that they're coming from. That's exactly what that is. That has nothing to do with, oh, you have to tough it out. That's just, you're just quitting. No. Because if 10 people are transferring, you have to look at the coaching staff. You have to look at the development around them, right? Why is it that coaches can leave one job for another job and start right away? The most notable that always boggles my mind is Willie Taggart. You go from Oregon to Florida State. I get that that's where you're from, this, that, and the third, but the way you did it and how it was done wasn't graceful. That wasn't fun. Chip Kelly doing the same thing again from Oregon to go to San Francisco. Same thing, right? Like,
I think it's also something that we don't talk about enough because
was
people
it San Francisco? Was it Philly?
Who again?
Chip Kelly.
Chip Kelly? It was from no, Chip Kelly went to Philly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But my point.
Sorry.
Okay. So one thing I want to point out is this. I think there's always a misconception in terms of what the motivations are for someone transferring. So a lot of people think of it as like, oh, I want to go to a situation where, there's a team that may be competing for a championship and I'm in a program. No, if somebody's transferring, chances are in most cases you're transferring because you're not getting the opportunity to play for one reason or another. It's not a case of I want to go to a team that contends. If you accepted an offer to a school, you accepted for whatever reason it may be, whether it's competing for a national championship, competing for a conference title, or getting national exposure, whatever the case may be, that was what you thought was going to be the ideal situation for you. That was your first choice. So you're not going to a situation that you deem to be more ideal all along. You're going to a brighter alternative because you see that, okay, it's not working here for whatever reason. And in most cases, more often than not, it's just simply, I'm not in a good fit, whether it's playing time or not being utilized to the ability that you feel you have. But in more cases than not, it's simply just a matter of playing time. And I think if we're looking at the notable examples of this, you can point back to the two that we brought up to start this podcast, which were, Joe Burrow, Justin Fields. But that's the motivation. It's not just a case of, oh, this isn't what I thought it was, like I want to go someplace where I'm going to win, or I want, brighter lights, a bigger spectacle. You're doing it because it's a last resort. You're doing it because what you thought you had didn't work out for you. And in most cases, it's a case of playing time. So that's the thing. It's not. That's why that parallel between coaches and players is it if you're trying to draw that parallel, if anyone's trying to draw that parallel,
no, there is no parallel.
No, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying you are. I'm saying if anyone tries to say like it tries to draw that parallel, like, well, what, look at the problem with coaches, like transferring from going from school to school and how it's the Wild West where if you succeed someplace, someone's just going to pilfer you. Well, no, it's different. It's much different. When you're coaching, you're looking for the next great opportunity. You're looking to always trade up. Always. These players, look at another OSU quarterback, Tate Martell. You think Tate Martell wanted to go to Miami originally? No, he wanted to play at OSU. He committed to OSU for a reason. He went there because he saw the writing on the wall. He saw, I'm not going to start here. I'm not going to get playing time if I stay here. So I need to go.
And I want to enhance that point that you're making. Why is it bad that a kid wants to take care of their personal brand? Why are they being castrated for worrying about themselves when said people that are supposed to help them develop and get better can do it all willy-nilly? They can do it however they want to do it, whether it's graceful or not. Think about it. There are recruits that were with Chip Kelly one day, sitting in their living room is Chip Kelly, and the next day he is moving to the East Coast. Granted, you're still relocating for a new opportunity, right? But you're shooting almost 2,500 miles in the opposite direction. Now, 2,500 miles might be a bit of hyperbole, but you get the point that I'm making, right? Like, I know, what is it? The equivalent of the distance of the Great Wall of China can stretch from Manhattan to Denver. Random freaking fact, but my 2,500 miles isn't that far off, right? Might be closer to 2 grand. Be that as it may,
Your point still is valid.
yeah. It boggles my mind that if a student athlete transfers, oh, they're not tough enough. Why are they only concerned about their playing time? Don't get me wrong. The ultimate goal is to allow these student athletes an opportunity to play a sport that they love while pursuing a degree, if they so choose to pursue a degree. You can enter any whatever draft or system that your sport has. That's fine. That's your prerogative, right? But only certain people who have that kind of talent get the reprieve. People thought Joe Burrow transferring was like, oh, okay, he's transferring. That's cool.
Right, but I get that not everyone's going to get to start in college. The fact is that some people are going to be backups their entire time on a college roster. It's inevitable. But you're talking about guys you're not talking about like 2 stars that are transferring. You're talking about 4-star recruits. Sometimes, occasionally 5-star recruits, like as the case with Justin Fields. You're talking about or Jacob Eason. You're talking about guys who are high-level recruits who were, for whatever reason, in a situation where, unfortunately, they weren't going to get playing time. We're not talking about 1-star, 2-star guys. We're not talking about walk-ons. We're talking about players who, at other universities, at most other schools, would be afforded that playing time. Why would we expect them to then flounder and never get the opportunity to play? They went to school with the expectation, with the goal, with the intent of playing, because they are looking at the next level. Yes. These aren't people that went to school to get the degree. They went to school to get the exposure, to get the playing time, to get the coaching, and to be able to work things out into an actual NFL career. And if you're having
NBA, whatever happened.
Exactly. And so to demonize them or to be critical of them and say like, oh, you took the easy way out, or oh, you weren't tough enough to win the starting spot. No, every situation is different, but you can't seriously tell me that you're going to take a guy with the talent level like that for whatever reason. And maybe he didn't beat out the guy in front of him, but if he can start in 90% of other locations, and there's processes in place for him to actually be able to go to a team that can better utilize him or her, why not? Why? Like, the fact is that, like, if okay, you want to say, well, it takes away an opportunity from somebody who would commit to that school originally, who was there. If they're talented enough, they'll start. To me, with college athletics, it is survival of the fittest to a certain extent. If the 4-star is transferring over to the school that the 3-star recruit has started at for a year or two, well, it's up to that 3-star then. If you want to talk about stepping up to the plate, you want to talk about being tough or challenging yourself, defend your starting spot against the guy transferring in. Because the thing is, if he's transferring in, he's going to still have to compete for the job. They're not going to anoint them the starter.
That's the biggest misconception. There have been, and I mean, I don't know the number exactly. It's going to be a difficult number to track, but there are multiple, by 24/7 Sports and Rivals.com, top 10 QBs who have been 4-star and 5-star that have fallen by the wayside that we don't even know about. Because, quite frankly speaking, I'm gonna call it what it is, because I see it up close and personal at other institutions. Were overrated coming out of high school. The proponent of their success was the fact they had just as much talent around them, so they were able to utilize that. Is that a bad thing? No, it's not a bad thing. But if you aren't somebody who knows how to develop within what you have properly, you get exposed. Like we talked about with Jimmy Clausen. Jimmy Clausen, from high school and college, had excellent wide receivers to throw to. Do you still have to have some kind of talent to be accurate and get them the ball? Yes. But when you look flat, when you look like the same QB throughout that 4, 5, 6, 7-year process leading up to getting into the NFL, you're going to get exposed for it. And that's exactly what happened. But again, to the point that Ethan is making, even if you are somebody who signed that national letter of intent with the intent to go to this institution to play, and the situation isn't there for you to do so, who are you to judge somebody for trying to find that situation? Again, we don't know the psyche of all of these athletes. I don't. I can't. It's physically impossible. But if somebody is looking out for their best interests, why are they being castrated?
Here's something interesting, by the way. Look at the last 3 number 1 overall picks in the NFL draft. Look at the last 3 Heisman winners. They're one and the same. They're the same 3 guys. And they're the same 3 guys because they all had one thing in common before either of those 2 things happened. They were all transfers. All 3 of them. And why? Because all 3 of them were blocked. Or actually, I will say this. I am wrong about one of them. I will say I am wrong about one of them. 2 of the 3 were transfers.
And
but my point still remains, though, right? My point still remains that 2 of the last 3, the 2018 number 1 overall, number 1 overall pick, and Heisman winner for the 2017 college football season, the 2020 number 1 overall pick, and the Heisman winner for the 2019 NFL season. No, I am right. I went back. I sometimes, Nick, it helps to trust your gut. The last 3 are all transfer QBs who won the Heisman Trophy because they finally got an opportunity. But think about the guys that were blocking them, right? You have first one. You had Baker Mayfield, who was blocked at Texas Tech. Who was in front of him?
Davis Webb?
No, I don't believe it was Davis Webb. I believe it was a guy by the name of Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, wow.
He came from Texas Tech. So Patrick Mahomes
my bad.
is you're good. Patrick Mahomes is blocking Baker Mayfield, who, yes, you want to, if we're being technical right now, I don't think anyone's going to argue that now at the NFL level, no one's going to make a serious argument that Baker Mayfield's a better quarterback than Patrick Mahomes. But the point being is that in college, you can make an argument Baker was better in college. Then you look at someone like Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray was blocked at Texas A&M. And that was in 2015. And then, yes. And then he actually was a victim of the transfer rule where he had to sit out in 2016. He lost a year of eligibility.
Yep.
And then goes out, back up in 2017. 2018 is only year starting, wins the Heisman Trophy, sets all kinds of efficiency records. And we saw how that's played out. Wonderful NFL prospect, has been one of the best QBs in the NFL since he stepped foot in the door. And now you're seeing with Joe Burrow, same thing. Blocked at his old school, got injured when trying to compete for the starting job, and saw yes. And just when it looked like maybe he might have actually had a chance to win it, gets injured, sees the writing on the wall, transfers, and to your point that you made before, despite the fact that he didn't get to LSU until like July, still with basically a month to prep before the season, still goes out and has a respectable first season with LSU. And then you saw the leap. Then you saw the potential come out in the 2019 college football season. 76% completion percentage, 5,600 yards, 60 touchdowns, 200 plus.
Video game numbers.
Yeah.
Video game numbers.
It's the greatest passing season by a college quarterback ever. And I don't know if anyone's going to really debate that one. It is the best passing season in NCAA history. And he did it.
If you're a college football fan, you've seen your fair share of very historic individual QB record setting.
And from a school that's not known for having quarterbacks put up those kinds of numbers. It's not like we're talking about a Texas Tech situation under Mike Leach, or Washington State under Mike Leach, or Texas Tech under Cliff Kingsbury, or Hawaii under June Jones.
Houston under Kevin Sumlin. Like we're
Exactly.
like the list goes on, right?
The list goes
And
on and on. This is not your typical air raid offense. This is not your run and shoot. This is not a West Coast style offense. This is a pro style, pro style offense out of LSU, and he puts up those numbers. And he does it against the best conference in the country defensively.
So to that point, I want to say this too, because there were a couple important transfer portal athletes on that LSU defense. One coming from North Dakota State. That defense was really good. That LSU defense was really good. It's just that the offense was so potent that it overshadowed the defense in a lot of different cases. But again, when you put yourself in a situation for like you said, for greener pastures, I'm not saying a Heisman Trophy in historic season is the result, but you performing to the level at which you can, perform at, or perform, never end a sentence in a preposition.
I wasn't going to check.
That becomes the case. That becomes the case, right? Again, Justin Fields. We all knew from America. I guess the Georgia brass didn't. But as America, we knew that he probably should have been the starting QB at Georgia as a freshman.
He played in the backyard, though. He was an in-state recruit. He played football at Kennesaw. Like, how did that get missed? That's the thing I don't understand here.
So there are three notable QBs from the Georgia area that two of the three didn't commit to Georgia at all. One did and transferred, that being Justin Fields. So your one is Trevor Lawrence, Clemson, and then the guy who replaced, and then number two, Deshaun Watson from Georgia. Those three QBs are from Georgia. Justin Fields did you a favor by committing. And then he had a little backup time. In one game, he went 8 of 9 for 70 yards and a touchdown, and then broke off for like a 40-yard touchdown run and was SEC Freshman of the Week. I'm not saying those stats are going to light up a scoreboard, but what he did in that sample size is exactly what he did in his first season as a starter at Ohio State. 41 touchdowns, 2-3 interceptions, something like that.
41-3, I think, yeah.
Yeah, like we had 3 1,000-yard receivers.
Which, by the way, going into the semifinals, it was, I think, 40-1, because I think he threw only 1 touchdown in that game and had 2 picks. His everything. But the thing is that those in the know, those who knew the kind of recruit he was, because he was the number 1 or number 2 recruit in the country, I think, going into Georgia. Those who knew
he was behind Trevor Lawrence.
Okay. But those in the know knew what kind of special talent he was. He was
yes.
Okay. If he was behind Trevor Lawrence, he would have been number 1 in almost any other class. My point is this.
Without a doubt.
My point is this. Those in the know, those who knew the scouting report on him, the kind of dual threat quarterback he could be, and not your typical dual threat like, oh, there are questions about the accuracy. No, a guy who was hyper accurate and could throw on the run and could also scramble to make plays happen. That kind of guy, a kind of guy who can run a 4.4 40, a 4.3 40 on a good day.
I want to talk about that.
We will, but that kind of ability and that kind of vision for the field, that's a special generational type talent coming out of high school. And you have him sit behind Jacob Fromm and Jacob Eason. You put him at number 3 on the depth chart.
Remember, it was Eason. Fromm takes the spot before Justin Fields is even in a uniform. Eason transfers.
Right, and that's the thing. But I'm saying, yes, Eason did transfer. But the point being is, though, you stacked QBs like that, it's inevitable that they're going to leave. It may not happen every single time, but more often than not, you're going to see this become more common because Eason should have been starting. whether you want to make the point about, oh, Jacob Fromm had a great freshman year, got to the national championship game as a freshman, kudos. But at the same time, look who was behind him. And at the same time, it's like, okay, well, you lost out on Eason. Better not make the same mistake with with Justin Fields. Oh no, we're gonna do that too. We're gonna also. I get.
As they call it, fumbling the bag.
I get why, in some respects, why you didn't make the switch from Fromm to Justin Fields, but to me, it just looks really, 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 really bad in hindsight. Because the thing is that okay, you saw what Jake Fromm did in 2017 as a freshman, right? But then you saw what he did in 2018, and the thing is that by all accounts, sure, his numbers went up, but there was nothing to suggest that Georgia was going to go over the hump and win a national championship with him.
Not at all.
Because they went in reverse from his freshman year to his sophomore year in a season that was key for him to make that jump to go from national finalist to national championship winner. And they didn't. For whatever reason, whether it's the team couldn't rally behind him to win games the way they did in 2017,
just not talent.
Or it's just or it might be the talent. And that's the thing. I'm not going to crap on Jake Fromm and say he was bad at Georgia. He wasn't. He was a good quarterback at Georgia. But if we're being honest with ourselves, the only reason why he stayed the starter in 2019 was because Justin Fields never got a chance to win that job. Because I'm sorry, there's no way, because OSU has the same kind of talent level they get for QBs every year too, if not greater talent level on average. For Fields to come in and win the starter job on a team, which, by the way, he did compete for, for him to go and compete and win the job at OSU speaks volumes about this. Because
that was a long process. That was a very long process. Like he came in January, but even at the time of the spring game, we saw what he was able to do. I will say that as fans of Ohio State, we still have our levels of skepticism.
Right.
And my bad, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, you're fine. It's more so the reason why I wanted to get to this point was think about who you had before Fields. You had Dwayne Haskins, but the thing is that you had Dwayne Haskins who had to compete with Tate Martell for that starting job. Martell, we forget, was the number one dual threat quarterback coming out of high school. He was a 4-star recruit and listed in the ESPN Top 100. Like he was legitimately, he was Gatorade National High School Player of the Year.
He has 3 high school national championships. No other QB has that. He has the accolades. To your point, he had everything that got him there.
And Haskins had to win the job away from him.
Right. And but again, that's who you're bucking up against every day in practice.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the level of, okay, he's good, but this person may be better, and this person is better than those two. Jacob Fromm really didn't have much that really set him apart from Justin Fields. Think about if you remember anything about his draft card, he had everything that reminded me of Chad Pennington. That's exactly what I called him in the draft. Chad Pennington. He didn't have the strongest of arms. He may not have been the most mobile, but he was just a football player who knew how to throw a football. That is all. That sounds insulting, and it might be. I don't care. This is my podcast. But what did he have that separated him from everybody else? Nothing. Jacob Eason at one point was being compared in his high school class as the next Peyton Manning of that class because of his ability to read, his ability to adjust, and his ability to also, my favorite call of all time for Peyton Manning is the bootleg touchdown scramble that he had against the Cowboys. Jacob Eason was touted as having that ability of pulling something out of his sleeve that would throw everybody off consistently. He had that comparison. Whatever Jake Fromm had coming out of high school, cool. But Justin Fields coming in, being able to, well, Fromm is an accurate passer. Well, so is Justin Fields.
Do we want to say that it was an overreaction by George to go with Fromm over Eason? Because Fromm won the starting job away from Eason. Eason started in 2016. Eason wasn't great as a freshman, but as a true freshman, 55% of his passes in hindsight doesn't look that bad going and playing in
as a
the
true
toughest.
Freshman, you're 18 years old. Like you said, toughest conference in America.
I hate that, by the way. I hate the whole SEC, like, oh, no better conference.
You know what? Let's forget the toughest conference. One of the biggest football brands in America. This is including the NFL. University of Georgia is one of the biggest football brands in all of football. I told myself at that time that I think this is just a premature reaction. I think you really need to give him another shot, because a guy like Fromm and a guy like Fields, who commit to their hometown schools, would not be against redshirting for a year if it meant that they had an opportunity to compete for the starting job the next year. That's hometown love. That is hometown love. Why do you think that you have, and now this is the trend, especially if like you're Mr. Basketball or Miss Basketball in your state, you go to the in-state school. And why do you think those awards are more likely given to the kid who stays in state? That's a different podcast topic for a different day, but those are those people. I don't think, and now you look at the QB situation Georgia's dealing with now. But about the transfer portal in a nutshell, it's like these kids are trying to give themselves an opportunity to do something great, something that they've worked hard for.
Joe Burrow left the in-state school. Joe Burrow did the opposite of what Jacob Eason did. Eason transferred to Washington. Home. He's from, transferred back home. Burrow's from Athens, Ohio. Burrow legitimately grew up. Yeah. What'd you say?
I said north. He's north.
He's North Ohio? I thought he was South.
No, I'm saying like he's from Ohio, right? To go to LSU. You got to get coming from the north.
He's coming from the north. He's from Athens, Ohio. Went to the flagship school in his state because he wanted to play for the Buckeyes. And trust me, it wasn't ideal. He didn't want to go to LSU. He didn't go to college to not play for his home state team. It's different. It's a different case scenario. Jacob Eason was a guy who was looking for the best situation for him in college. He didn't say, I want to play for my in-state team. He said, I want to play for the best situation for me as a quarterback to develop. And he felt it was Georgia. That didn't pan out for him, unfortunately. And he had a path that was not really typical for a guy that transfers. He was the guy. He was a starter as a true freshman. Yes. Lost his job. And ironically enough, lost it because there was a QB competition, and he lost it to Jacob Fromm. That's why the thing with Georgia is so surprising to me, because they can say all they want. They gave Fields a chance to win the starting job, but there's no way they did. There's no way, because Fields' talent level compared to Jacob to Jake Fromm is miles ahead than the talent level of Jacob Eason and Jake Fromm. The gap between those two was way smaller. And so I don't even feel bad that or I don't even, and again, maybe I'm biased because of where I went to school, but I always thought it was a no-brainer to let Fields start right away. Why punish him and say you lose a year of eligibility because you were in a situation where everything kind of worked against you in that sense? And it's the same with I really do believe that whole rule of having to sit out for a year unless you get a special circumstance is something that really needs to be revisited. If you're transferring for a reason. You're not transferring because you're seeking just an upgrade. You're transferring because the situation that you're in was not ideal. It was a situation where, realistically speaking, you needed that change in scenery. And we can harken back to all the other examples. I'm sure Baker Mayfield wanted to stay in state. He's a Texas guy. I don't think he wanted to have to leave. Same with Kyler Murray, Texas guy. I'm sure he didn't want to have to leave. Jalen Hurts didn't want to leave Alabama, but he saw what was happening with Tua Tagovailoa. He knew Tua was the guy.
And that's the thing too. Jalen Hurts actually stayed and still competed. He understood that the best way for me to handle this situation is I'm going to tough this out. I'm still going to be supportive, but I'm also going to have my options in my back pocket because I am going to have options.
People forgot he did stay a year as a backup before leaving.
Yep. And got to Oklahoma and almost, which is kind of hard to do when you had back-to-back Heisman Trophy winners, kind of reset the culture at Oklahoma. You can call it a stretch of a topic, of a saying, but there was a different beat when Jalen Hurts was there.
And it was an Easton situation as well. He got chased out of there by the backup.
And the beautiful part about, what Jalen Hurts did at Oklahoma is he also took a step forward as a QB. We don't know about his downfield passing. He was one of the most accurate downfield passers that season in college football.
Yeah, we don't know about his accuracy. He's only completing 50-something% of his passes at Alabama. He's really more of a dual threat guy. Doesn't really look like an NFL quarterback. Well, he went to Oklahoma, and Lincoln Riley turned him into a second-round pick, and the current starter for the Eagles.
Mind you, he was the first freshman, redshirt or not, to start at QB at Alabama under Nick Saban. His first game was primetime against Michigan in the Cotton Bowl Classic at Jerry World. That was his first game. First game. And what did he do? Decimated that team. He had a pedestrian 200-something yards passing and like 80-something yards rushing. But he dissected that Michigan team, did what he had to do, and they won that game by the margin that they did. I think it was probably more than 17 points. But when you have the opportunity to see the writing on the wall and put yourself in a very, forgiving situation that's going to allow you to develop in some form of fashion, you do that. You do that. I want to remind Buckeye fans that Ron Lewis, the shooting guard, at the time we went to the 2007 NCAA National Championship game, was a transfer from Bowling Green State. He saw the writing on the wall at Bowling Green State that he may not have the NCAA success that he's looking for. Transfers 90 minutes south from Bowling Green to Columbus and helps us get to a national championship game. Yeah, we talk about Mike Conley, we talk about Greg Oden, but Ron Lewis was he was our second leading scorer. It happens. And he didn't catch flack for that. I remember that. I remember when all of that happened. I met him at the basketball camp the summer he transferred in. These kids look out for themselves, and that's fine. Mind you, he's a graduate transfer, so he didn't have to sit out. That doesn't matter. If you're looking for the best situation for yourself, whether it's school, work, whatever have you, you're going to take that chance. Stop scrutinizing these kids and start looking at the systems and the institutions that they're transferring from. Again, Syracuse women's basketball has 10 women transferring from that program. I don't care if it's your football team. If you have 10 people transferring, you need to look at the system that's in play, because that's a problem. That's a red flag. And in a sport that only allows you to have 15 on a roster,
that's 2/3 of your roster that is looking to transfer out. That's crazy. Which, by the way, I'm glad you brought that to light, because I didn't know about that actually.
So I was stumbling upon just information on the transfer portal. This is why I brought the topic up. I am a co-founder of an organization, and we discussed matters of higher education, coaching, administration, and whatnot. And we got on the topic about the transfer portal. And there are a couple of coaches that we know personally that have had a few kids transfer. And I was curious after our conversation about, what the numbers of the transfer portal look like. And I read somewhere at the time, maybe 2 weeks ago, that there were 1,078 athletes that are transferring, that are in the transfer portal for these sports, these main sports. I'm like, oh, that's a pretty astounding number. Compared to the numbers around the same time last year, it was only up by 2. I said, okay, scrolling through, and I hit an article about most notable teams with people transferring out. I clicked the link, and the first team that popped up was Syracuse women's basketball, and they have 10 women transferring. I dropped my phone, and I was like, that's crazy. I'm going to get my laptop, and I'm going to do so. I'm going to Google this. Googled it, pops up, same thing. 10 women transferring. Freshmen, sophomores, international recruit, the whole nine. You name it, they have it. A couple starters, your sixth woman coming off the bench, one of your high-profile recruits, gone. They've entered the transfer portal. 10. Now, to the parents who are pushing sports dreams onto your kids, I know what you're thinking. Ooh, that's 10 scholarship, spots that are opening up. I'm gonna tell you like this. I'm gonna be very honest with you because I've sat on many recruiting calls and I have hosted a number of recruits and families. If that is your way of saying that's a spot open, you need to look at yourself deeply and really evaluate what you really want that's best for your kid when you're pushing these dreams. Because if my kid is being pursued by a school that has something like that, we're going to look at the coach themselves first. Like, why do you have 10 kids transferring? Is that going to be a safe space for you to, start your collegiate career, the life that you're going to take on your own now with something that helps you get there? I don't know, Ethan.
Well, the thing I want to know.
I'm not going to be that parent.
That's fair. No, and I think that's a good point. I think it's a really good point because at a certain point you do have to ask yourself, like, is it worth it? But the thing I want to know is you have 2/3 of the team transferring. What's keeping those other 5 there? That's as much of a question as I want to know is why are the other 5 still there?
Why is the coach still there?
And that's another burning question too.
There are so many questions.
But that's the thing though. Do we know why this is happening? We don't know why it's happening. We know it's happening, but we don't know the cause. Until that comes to light, if that ever comes to light, we can only speculate what the reasoning is. It could be the coach. It could be something else.
That's the problem with articles about schools that have so many people enter the transfer portal. They don't really release a lot of the information. They say there's 10. These are including these most notable names. This person's a freshman. This is their what their playing time is, whatever have you, so on and so forth, right? But I don't want to beat the transfer portal into a pulp because it's something that's forever changing. And even in the last 6 months, it has changed. It keeps glowing. I want to segue into a point that while we're really here, but before that, I want you to finish with your point.
So the one I will say is this. I've seen counterpoint on transfer portal stuff, but the one that seems to be more divisive than anything else is the grad transfer. And specifically, I still have no problem with that, by the way. I personally don't. If you've already got your degree and you still have a year of eligibility, why not? You've already got your degree. You want to still play, and you're technically by NCAA standards still eligible. Why not? People are saying, it turns college football even more into free agency or into a mercenaries game. Whatever. I would come off that point. I don't view it any differently than someone who's still enrolled full-time in school. If they're meeting NCAA requirements and enrolling in the minimum number of hours as a grad transfer, then so be it. If you want to take leisure studies classes for the minimum number of hours required to be able to play on the team, and you've already got your actual degree, so be it. But my point is this: the one that I saw that triggered this whole conversation, the one I always think back to, is Vernon Adams coming from Eastern Washington to Oregon as a grad transfer. That's the one that kind of really ignited that discussion of is college football or college sports turning into a free agency game? Because that's the one where it's just okay, well, now he's transferring. It's a better opportunity to play on a national stage. But that was a guy who was the FCS player of the year before. Literally the biggest prize for the transfer portal. Several schools were looking at him. He was being recruited as a grad transfer, and that's usually not the case. Not a lot of guys get actively recruited when they enter the transfer portal. Usually they seek out the schools. Schools sought to pitch to him, and Oregon was the best case scenario for him. And in hindsight, yeah, there's very few people you'd rather transfer to very few schools you'd rather transfer to than Oregon. Now, granted, he missed Chip Kelly, unfortunately, ended up with what was it, Mark Helfrich or something?
Yeah, the physics teacher. I'm sorry, my bad. He always looked like a physics teacher to me.
To be fair, though, Helfrich did take them to a national title game.
He did. And you know what? I was just talking to one of my best friends about this. I try to give people their flowers while they're here and in very random moments. Mark Helfrich, you helped create one of the most exciting low-score national championship games we've seen. Let's be honest, 22-19, that for college football,
that wasn't what I'm talking about. That was Chip Kelly.
That was Chip Kelly.
Mark Helfrich was 42-20. Mark Helfrich was OSU Oregon 42-20.
Wow.
But
on that note, I'm gonna log off here. This has been Ethan Cashflow podcast. Ethan is gonna take over for the rest of time here. I'm gonna go ahead and put my head in dirt next to the ostriches out here.
The reason why Mark Helfrich doesn't get credit is because he inherited essentially the offensive scheme that Chip Kelly revolutionized at the college level. And he inherited, to a certain extent, most of those pieces. He inherited Marcus Mariota, who we saw won the Heisman that year, ended up as the number 2 draft pick in the NFL. And honestly, I don't think gets enough credit for being a solid NFL quarterback, and just because he didn't live up to the hype. But injuries have also played into that to a certain extent. We're not going to get into that. We're not going to talk about Mariota's NFL career. But the point being is that Helfrich doesn't get credit enough because you still have to maintain that level of excellence, even if the system was already put in place and the players were already there for you. Yeah. And that's why I don't really completely crap on Larry Coker for taking over from for taking over from Butch Davis at Miami, because yes, Coker was in the right place, right time, but are we going to crap on Jimmy Johnson for taking the reins from Howard Schnellenberger at Miami? No. But that's my point is this. Going back to the original point is that Vernon Adams was really the one where everybody kind of started to question, what are we doing here? Yeah. If we've got a guy who got his degree already from Eastern Washington, already graduated, he's going to play one season at Oregon. He's going to take a team that was already a contender, just came off of a national title appearance, by the way, I believe, because I think this was ahead of the 2015 season.
Yes.
Just came off of a national title game appearance, and you're essentially basically, okay, you lost the reigning Heisman winner, but you literally replace him with a guy who won the FCS equivalent the previous year. What are we doing? But I still don't really have an issue with it, especially with everything that's happened since. And that's my overlying point, is that one case shouldn't be the thing that you judge everything on. Sure, you can say it was unfair that happened, but in most cases, I think it's perfectly warranted. And Adam still had his reasons for doing it. He wanted to get drafted. He wanted to play at the pro level. And he knew that realistically speaking, he had a better shot at getting drafted playing at Oregon than he did at Eastern Washington. More eyeballs on you. I don't fault the kid for doing that.
No, again, it's your brand, right? You do what you need to do to help enhance your brand. And that's what he did. And that's the problem that a lot of these, I consider myself a very malleable traditionalist. There are things that I am like, hey, I don't know if I can just shake this, right? But I'm also understanding that old factions need to be done away with. You need to stick it out. You need to ride because this shows that you ain't got no loyalty and all this, that, and the third. Does the NCAA have loyalty to me? Do these institutions that I signed my national letter of intent have loyalty to me? Because I'm transferring for a reason. I almost dropped the F-bomb right there. I had to catch myself. But that's the question. you want me to be loyal to a system that can easily, that any coach can literally say, hey, that's fine. I'll have another one of you here quickly. Okay, prove it. I'll leave. Because I put up these numbers, I have these stats, I have these accolades, and there are people that are looking for me. That's cool. Because the same coach that you're saying that to me is probably saying that to the same person. I might be that person that rolls right in as I'm rolling out. So without me, the product is diminished. Oh, this kid is transferring because they don't like the coach. Get used to it. You're not going to like your boss, but I'm in very prime formation years of my life right now. I'm going to do whatever I can to put myself in a situation where I can say, I like my boss. Are we really going to be inhumane in that thinking? Now, to stem from this point, from a notable name, Justin Fields, I really want to get into the bastardization of his scouting right now compared to other NFL QBs.
Can we just go ahead and say it? It's the most subtle form of racism in pro sports.
It really is, and it bothers me because we see it happen day in and day out. Bill Polian and his comments about Lamar Jackson set me over the edge.
It's damaging too, because here's the thing. When you hear it from people who are deemed as experts, when you hear it from people from front offices or former front office people, when you hear it from scouts, it's dangerous because then people start parroting the same motifs. I myself doubted Lamar Jackson at the pro level, not for the same reasons that they did though. But the thing is I kept hearing it from other people ahead of the draft, and they were championing the same things that were being said on these draft shows, on these scouting reports, on these mocks about him. I didn't like his pro prospects for a different reason. It's not because I didn't think that he had the ability to be able to read an NFL defense. It was simply I didn't like the way his game transferred from the scheme he ran at Louisville. It wasn't because I had any doubts about his ability to read a defense. Sure, there were question marks about his accuracy in college, but at the same time, most dual threat quarterbacks don't necessarily prioritize that aspect of their game.
Yeah, like but historically, they're not the most accurate, but they can complete a pass.
Exactly, and that's the thing. It's also something where I believe, historically speaking, and Josh Allen is the exception to this, not the new rule. If you're not accurate in college, you're probably not going to be accurate at the pro level too. You don't go from being a sub 65% guy to being a 65 and over guy in the NFL. You don't go from being sub 60 to being over 60 consistently. Josh Allen's been the exception to that. But the thing is I never doubted like what he did at Louisville. You had games where he would take over on his arm alone and his ability to pick defenses apart. No one's going to question. No one should question if you watched him play his ability to be able to read a defense. The question marks I had were, could he consistently complete those passes that were more than 5 yards, 10 yards down the field? Could he have the accuracy on deep throws? Could he consistently be able to throw even on the run? That's the question mark I had, was if a play broke down and he was running, could he complete a throw on the run? Could he improvise and still be accurate? And those question marks were answered, and I was wrong. And so far, I will absolutely eat crow on that. Do I still think he's going to have a season?
I wouldn't call you eating crow. Here's my thing about what you're saying. You're assessing him as the QB. You're not assessing him as the athlete.
Right.
You're assessing him as
the reason I'm saying I'm eating crow is because he went out there and won an MVP award. I still don't think he's going to have a season like he did in 2019 ever again, because I think defenses are going to adjust, and I think you saw that last year. He still had a good season last year, but I think I ate crow in the sense that I didn't think that he would be a good NFL quarterback, but I thought it for different reasons, and I don't like that this same thing is making its way into draft grades, that we're talking about doubt for quarterbacks to be able to read defense, to be able to process things, to lack field awareness, and to basically not trust multiple reads. And you're noticing an overarching theme here. We do that at an alarmingly higher rate for Black quarterbacks.
Than we do
at an alarmingly higher rate.
And this is where it gets very frustrating. Not once did I hear about what's the QB from BYU, Zach Wilson. Not once did I hear about him being able to read a defense. Not once did we hear, or at least did I hear, and you can correct me, or let me know it has been said or not. I never heard anything about him being able to make the difficult throws in these third and manageable situations, or driving the team down in a 4-minute, 3-minute, 2-minute drill, for a touchdown to win the game. You didn't hear anything about that. All you heard was he has such amazing arm talent. He can make all the NFL throws. The fact that he can throw cross body 55, 60 yards in the air and it still looks accurate is all we've heard. But for Justin Fields, it's 70% of his passes have gone to his first read. Well, did you ever realize that the first read was open? He doesn't know how to read his progressions. Do you understand how much time a QB really has in the pocket? You know what goes on between 2.5 and 3.5 seconds in a pocket? He's probably reading 3 to 4 of his receivers right now, including the tight end. And his first read was probably still open. Did we ever think about what kind of talent he has in adjusting to what's given to him? Because at the end of the day, a dual threat quarterback is what it is, right? They are able to do something that pocket passing quarterbacks can't do. When there's something that's not there, they're able to make something happen with their feet. Justin Fields was never a scramble first QB. Now, I was there at his first start as an Ohio State QB. He rushed for a touchdown for his first touchdown, but the play broke down. No receiver was open. So what happened? There was 40 yards of green pasture in front of me. If I could run at least a 4-5, I'm booking. I'm taking off. Again, what does a pocket passing QB do in that situation? They throw the ball away. So if a dual threat QB, who in his first season as a starter throws for 41 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, and rushes for almost 800 yards and 10 plus touchdowns, and is able to get your team to a national college football playoff semifinal game against another very talented team who in the same draft class has the QB being raved about and being compared to the legends that we see today. But you have an issue because 70% of his reads are to his completions are to his first read. Talk about the DBs that are being beat in that situation by his first reads all the time, right? Think about this, Ethan. If 70% of your completions are to your first read, do you know how talented you have to be to get to your first read that amount of times?
Right. And the other thing is that defenses are going to be, that's the thing. Defenses are covering your first read in more cases than not. Your first read is going to be a primary receiver. In most cases, you're not going to have that. So to be able to complete that throw, if your first read is the correct read, it means your receiving talent, one, is incredible to be able to adjust for that and still get themselves open. And two, even with that, you're not looking at the widest windows, even if they are open. So it speaks to his ability to place the ball in spots where only his guy can get it. That's one of two things. The other is, by the way, is every time someone can run now, we start like saying, well, we try to compare them to like a Michael Vick or now Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
But the thing is that but the thing is that I see a lot more Russell Wilson in Justin Fields, a guy that is a throw first quarterback who can make plays happen with his feet, than I see Lamar Jackson. You want to talk about a quarterback where he may run even if the play doesn't break down. Sure, you can categorize Lamar Jackson, but that's not Justin Fields. Another thing that doesn't get talked about, by the way, and this is why I'm upset with the narrative that Zach Wilson is absolutely the clear-cut number 2 choice ahead of Justin Fields as far as quarterbacks. Who did he play against? I get it.
Lost his only tough matchup against Coastal Carolina.
And he got put on his ass.
I don't want to hear anything else about what Zach Wilson can do if you can't pull up the game film about Justin Fields and his moments in tough games. The man had one of the best. single game performances in the college football playoff against a team that beat him the year before.
And we also have to talk about, well, you can say like, oh, well, he struggled against Northwestern and against Indiana. Okay, well, against Indiana had a top 15, top 20, top 10, top 20
defense. Top 10 matchup. That was a top 10 matchup.
Top 10 matchup, period. Indiana was ranked number 8, I think, going into that game.
Yes, 2 versus 8.
And Northwestern, by the way, had a top-ranked defense. And on top of that, he was missing, I don't know if we remember this, but Olave.
Think about it.
He was missing his number 1 receiver also.
He suffered a concussion that game, like first quarter or something like that?
I don't think Olave. No, I don't think Olave was playing. I thought Olave didn't start the game.
Be that as it, but the point you're making is without one of his top targets, he had to play without him, right?
Yes. He had to play without the number 1 receiver the whole game. And against a team that, also against another team, a team that had Newsome, who is one of the top defensive prospects in the entire country.
I want to say this, though, before you conclude that point. I want to say this because I feel like I need to interject this in your point, is that I did agree with what an NFL scout did say. When coverages are shifted late and defensive adjustments are shifted mid-play, that's where Justin Fields struggles. Okay, so what do you do when you see this NFL prospect and they're looking to get drafted? That team is going to help them get to the next level, right? Those 2 games in particular, Northwestern and Indiana, both of those teams both teams at one point were both ranked in the top 15 in the country. Somehow, some way, Justin Fields was able to win that game.
We also forget what he did. Again, if you're going to dock him for that, give him credit for the Clemson game, like we mentioned before, because he went out there. And by the way, that hit he took, which was targeting, that hit he took. You want to talk about his work ethic. You want to question his work ethic, which, by the way, that whole thing, that's what perhaps pissed me off more than anything else, is questioning the guy's work ethic and saying like he's a last guy in, first guy out type of guy. Are you kidding me? He took a shot that would have probably knocked most QBs out of the game. He took a shot, came back in after taking 1 play to recover, and threw a touchdown pass. The first play back, in a beautiful, beautiful comeback in the corner of the end zone. And goes and throws for 5 more after that.
Let me ask you this question, Ethan. And this isn't a black or white question, but how do we really know somebody is the last guy in, first guy out, first guy in, last guy out? How do we really know that? How do we really know that? Because I'll be honest with you, there are people who have skated. Jamarcus Russell, who skated on just talent alone, didn't really have the work ethic. They were able to just out-talent people. Looking at the era of talent now compared to back then, he would not be regarded as any form of top 5 QB at all, right?
No, if you reevaluate Jamarcus Russell today, he doesn't go in the first round.
His biggest issue was also that he didn't want to adjust his diet at all. Justin Fields adjusted his diet. He said, I want to optimize my talent. He told him, he admitted there were certain games in the season where in the fourth quarter, I was completely gassed. And part of it was because I needed to eat better food. So what did he do in the off season? He lost a little weight. He adjusted his diet and he looked great. Granted, he didn't have all the bulk that he had when he came in, but he looked better. He looked better. So when you question somebody's work ethic, what are we really questioning here? Are we questioning their will to play the game? Or are we questioning what you think is perceived as a lack of effort? And again, it seems like it's only being targeted to black QBs.
What about, okay, so that's the thing. To your point also, to this point as well, we'll bring up Josh Allen. Let's absolutely bring up Josh Allen because, again, took a huge step this past season, was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, was an MVP candidate. And again, as a Bills fan, very happy with what's happened with him. But remember, when he stepped foot in the league, first season he completed 52% of his passes, second season 58%. So to improve by 6 is great, and then jumped 11% this year. And again, as I said, he's the exception to the rule, not the rule. But coming out of college, there were people talking about taking him number 1 overall at some point. Yes, we understand he didn't end up going number 1 overall, but the guy ended up going in the top 10, and he completed 55% of his passes in college. 55.
But they were enamored with what? Arm strength.
But nobody talked about that. Nobody talked about the lack of accuracy. They were like, he's big. He's got all the raw arm talent. He's got all the tools, the size you look for in an NFL quarterback. He's mobile. Nobody talked about that. And he was playing against shit defense. Sorry. He was playing against crap defenses in Family Show, guys. Family Show. He's playing against
Family swears apart of one another too, guys. So
he was playing against crap defenses. And yet, I mean, unless the Mountain West defensive quality is just so much better than I remember. But the point being that he was playing against bad defenses, still struggling to complete 50% of his passes, and still on just raw arm talent alone was taken in the top 10. And we didn't emphasize. We basically said, oh, he's moldable. You can if there's any holes in his game, and there are. We didn't specify them. We didn't point them out. We said a team can really, really work with this. This is such an open mold of clay that you can work with. But someone like a Justin Fields,
you're expecting him to be the completed marble statue,
right? And that's the thing. Justin Fields has everything that Josh Allen had coming out of college, and more accurate. Had just as good of an arm. If you want to say the difference in their arm is that Allen can throw it 80 yards downfield and Fields might be able to throw it 70. At that point, you're splitting hairs to me. Fields is just as mobile, if not more mobile than Josh Allen. He's more mobile than Josh Allen. Exactly. He's more mobile than Josh Allen, more fleet of foot. He's more accurate in the pocket and on the run. He's more accurate. He's got more field awareness. There's nothing about Fields that is any less impressive than Josh Allen, and in almost every case is more impressive across the board. The only thing Allen had on him is simply size. That's it, because Josh Allen is 6'6".
Okay, so you guys 6'6", 240 compared to 6'3", 225 pounds. Because everybody wants a QB that's over 6'2", right?
Right, but that's the thing we're seeing with these quarterbacks like Kyler Murray. We saw with Drew Brees, who's only 6 feet. We're seeing with Russell Wilson, who's 5'11". Height doesn't matter. It doesn't. This whole thing, he can't see over the offensive line. That's BS. We've seen that's BS. It's the same nature of left-hand quarterbacks can't succeed in the NFL. Right. Tell that to Steve Young. My point is this. All of these things that we use to knock Justin Fields, and the biggest defender by far being the fact that you have questions about his ability to read a defense. It's insane that we're still talking about these things like this in 2021. This was a guy who 3 months ago was the unquestioned number 2 QB off the board and was being talked about as being hands down a lot.
How about the college football playoff, right? The college football playoff, him and Trevor Lawrence, where they talked about in the future, these two might be the top 2 QBs taken. We know who's number 1. Justin Fields is going to be number 2. This was the college football playoff 2 years ago. Right. And then they brought it up again this past year.
Well, before the season even started, people were saying and I was proud. No. People were saying Justin Fields. Do we really think that Trevor Lawrence may be better? Is it possible that Justin Fields may actually be the better quarterback? There were open discussions about this, but somewhere down the line, somewhere in the span of August 2020 to February 2021, the narrative somehow in that span of time flipped. Where starting in March of this year, people started saying Justin Fields may not be a top 5 pick.
I have a name for you. Trey Lance?
He didn't play. I get that you like the tools, but he played at the FCS level and didn't play this year. And now suddenly he's being talked about as being the 3rd or 4th quarterback off the board. Really? Matt Jones at number 3, by the way. I don't think the 49ers are going.
That's disrespectful.
I don't
That
think
is very
for the
disrespectful.
record, I don't think it's going to happen. But if it does, that's insane to me. Again, yeah, sure, he completed 77% of his passes, was insanely accurate. But look at what he was playing with. Look at who he was playing with. And I'm sorry, I think the SEC had a down year this year. I don't think it was as deep of a conference as it's traditionally been.
I'm going to say this because the same way Mac Jones got this love that Joe Burrow got, Joe Burrow actually was an X factor. I'm not saying Mac Jones won't be an NFL QB, but Joe Burrow had more to do with the success of LSU than Mac Jones had to do with the success at Alabama.
Yeah.
Here's my other problem. You know who Mac Jones reminds me of?
What, from a college
Yes.
to the NFL?
No, just in college. You won't know the name. I mean, you'll know the name, but you probably won't guess it.
No.
It's in the SEC.
I actually was going to compare him to somebody who's closer to home. I was going to compare him to Dwayne Haskins, an accurate guy who threw up monster numbers in college playing for a hyper-efficient offense, but he wasn't necessarily the only X factor on the team.
No, I wasn't going in that direction. You know what Mac Jones reminds me of?
In the SEC?
Yes.
Don't say it. Don't say Drew Lock.
No.
Okay, I'm glad you didn't say Drew Lock because I never thought Drew Lock should have been hyped the way he was. Give me a second. I'm going to at least give you one guess. You're saying I probably won't guess it? How recent are we talking?
2012.
Let's see.
You're not guessing.
There's a guy that played in the SEC in 2012, but was a different kind of QB altogether and didn't put up the kind of pure passing numbers.
His name?
It's not Manziel.
No.
It's. There's no way it's Manziel. Wait. Ryan Tannehill?
No, you're not gonna guess it.
Also, Tannehill was after Manziel.
No. So I guess you would say 2011 season, but no. You're not gonna guess it. I'm just gonna say Aaron Murray.
Wait, no. So here's the thing. I was saying to myself, because I didn't have the time frame right. I'm like, was Aaron Murray before or after Matt Stafford? And so I'm now really upset because that was the name on my mind, as you literally said for the last time, you're not going to get it. And I'm mad at myself for not saying it. That's why I reacted the way I just did.
You put Aaron Murray in Mac Jones' situation and flip, it's the same outcome. Aaron Murray was credited as not being able to win the big game at Georgia because they just didn't have enough talent to beat Alabama. You put Aaron Murray in a situation where he has better talent, this is what you get. There's nothing about Mac Jones that surprises me. Like, I'm not saying that the QB has to have the craziest of stats and ceiling, right? Mac Jones did everything right. I get that. But I put him in the boat of Chad Pennington as a guy who can do everything right, but I don't think he's your guy that's going to lead you to winning a big game.
I'm surprised you didn't go with the Sam Bradford comparison then.
No.
Sam Bradford played for a national title. Sam Bradford won a Heisman Trophy. Sam Bradford put up ridiculous stats.
But we all knew why Sam Bradford was so successful.
Bob Stoops.
Yes.
Yeah, but okay, but hang on. Are we going to pretend like Steve Sarkisian isn't an offensive genius? We forget what he is as a head coach, but Steve Sarkisian is a phenomenal offensive coordinator. He is.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the parallel is a bad one, because Bob Stoops as an offensive mind is on that same level as Steve Sarkisian as an offensive genius.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
but if I don't like the credit that all of these QBs are getting, and Justin Fields isn't getting it. And I want to say this quickly, since I work in track and field. Justin Fields could have definitely run 4.38. There are a couple things that bothered me. First was his start. He was forward, too forward. Dynamically, you want to get out of your break or out of the start at a 45-degree angle, but he was like 65 degrees. That's why he stumbled, which is problem number two. His first two steps, he dragged his toe. If he cleaned that up, we're talking 4.38, 4.39 easily. But to run 4.41 as a QB, I don't care who you are. You got some wheels. I love that, and I wish Justin Fields did it, but I love that Lamar Jackson didn't even run a 40.
If he drops to the bottom of the top 10 or drops outside of the top 10, people are going to be very sorry about that.
They're getting a steal.
The fact is that him to San Francisco is as much of a no-brainer. If the Jets are serious about taking Zach Wilson at number 2, him in San Francisco with those weapons that he gets to come into, it just makes way too much sense. And the fact that we're even having this debate is insane.
Here's my problem. Shanahan doesn't really cater to dual threat QBs. He likes his.
Except that RG3 had a phenomenal rookie campaign with Shanahan as his coach. RG3 had his best NFL season with Shanahan being the coach.
He did. I agree.
And the difference being is that Fields, from what we've seen, buys into the team philosophy a little bit more. Fields is not going to be as combative and not going to be as stubborn. RG3's problem was that he had philosophical differences in coaching. He thought differently about how his game translated at the NFL level comparative to the team that was actually coaching him. Fields will buy in. We've seen that Fields buys in. I think that's the difference. And by the way, talking about teams where I don't want him to go to, Washington is legitimately the one team I want him to avoid like the plague. I think that's where QB dreams go to die. No offense to anyone who is a Washington football team fan.
Honestly, if your name is not Doug Williams.
Or Kirk Cousins.
Yeah. I guess. I mean.
Or Alex Smith for a brief stretch.
Jason Campbell. I don't know. I hear you though.
Even Campbell's not immune from that one though. But that's my point is just if he's not taken in that top 3 or 4, it's nuts that we're talking about him potentially tumbling out of the top 10.
And it shouldn't be that way. Okay. And to wrap this up, I see this happening again, maybe not in the way that it happened, but I do see a team doing something to make sure that they're the ones that get Justin Fields, is what Ozzie Newsome did getting Lamar Jackson, trading into the first round to pick him.
You know what? I wouldn't even be mad if Belichick was just like, you know what? We really like Fields. Let's go ahead and trade up to like number 4. I don't like the Patriots, but of all the teams you could go to, if you want a team that's going to believe in you and push you, and there are very few guys as a dual threat quarterback that I'd rather learn from than Cam Newton, who you can argue about what he has left in the tank, but at his peak was legitimately one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. That's a pairing that I could see making sense. I hope, honestly, that someone like Carolina, with the talent that they have there and a good young head coach in Matt Rule, decides, let's jump up and let's get him. Because if Mike Shanahan is serious about Mac Jones as his guy, he didn't need to trade up to 3. And maybe this is a smokescreen. Maybe he's looking at Fields or Lance.
I hope so. Maybe not Lance,
but it's possible he also is looking at something else. It's possible he's looking at Kyle Pitts. We don't know, but I just have a hard time believing you trade up to 3 to take Mac Jones
or Zach Wilson.
Zach Wilson's going 2. I think the writing is on the wall with that one. Zach Wilson's going 2. I think we have to talk about this draft from 3 down at this point. I'm not convinced that Trevor Lawrence is better than Justin Fields, to be quite honest. I think that Fields may be the best QB in this draft. And yes, there's 100% some bias behind that statement, but what we saw in college, did you really see from film anything that made Trevor Lawrence stand out at you more than Justin Fields? Fields played a tougher schedule, put up better numbers. Look at them. Both years he put up better numbers. I get that Trevor Lawrence started for 3 years, but the 2 years that they both started at the same time, Fields was better both years. Fields
he's not the darling. That's it. He's not the darling. Trevor
but that's insane to me though, because you're literally talking about the 1 and 2 ranked guys in their respective class. You're talking about the literally the difference between being like what if it's like saying like if Peyton Manning and Drew Brees came out in the same class somehow, if like the 98 and 2001 NFL drafts merged, it's like saying, okay, we have Peyton Manning there, we have Drew Brees right here. That's essentially what we're talking about in terms of like draft prospects here. You're basically splitting hairs at this point, saying like, okay, one guy might be a little bit better than the other guy. Come on. This doesn't have to be this hard. And the only reason it's the way it is because we still have some sort of racial bias against black quarterbacks. That's the only thing I can think of. Because there's no scout in their right mind that's going to tell me that Mac Jones checks off more boxes across the board than Justin Fields, and that Zach Wilson checks off more boxes across the board than Justin. People were saying, "Oh, look at that play action, cross the body, throw deep." Okay, cool. Look at
in a t-shirt. It's a t-shirt.
But I'm saying,
shorts.
But look at Justin Fields, like in his pro day, he makes that throw. Any QB prospect worth their weight can make that freaking throw. So I'm tired of seeing that trope. Kellen Mond did a pro day where he did the same freaking thing. And we're talking about Kellen Mond being a 4th or 5th round pick. Come on. What are we doing?
I think he's better than Zach Wilson.
He played better competition. I don't know if he's better than Zach Wilson in terms of tools I've viewed, but at the same time, I think we really need to reevaluate the way we scout QBs because we've been very flawed. Anyone who thought Mitch Trubisky was a better pro prospect than both Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes needs to get their head checked.
And on that note, we're going to conclude Ethan and Nick's Trash Boat podcast.
Yes. Before I punch a hole in this wall that already has a hole in it that I'm not going to show you folks. But
thank you again for tuning in. It's been a great episode. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter. You see the icons right there, right below.
Yes. There's one right there, one right there. Be sure to spread the word, spread the good word
of the greatest sports podcast you've ever heard.
Absolutely. The greatest, with the greatest namesake of all time.
And we will be back.
Yes, we will be back, hopefully sooner rather than later. But take care, guys. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
Yes.
See ya.